Near Detroit, there's a place called Cranbrook. Many famous artists and designers have studied here. Eero Saarinen, Reid, and Charles Ames are among the artists and designers who have history here. There are quite a few wonderful sculptures that dot the expansive grounds. I have always been drawn to this particular piece by Marshall Fredericks, entitled The Thinker. The original is black granite, and it is held up considerably well considering it's almost 80 years old. Having recently received a 3D POP scanner from Revopoint, I decided to do a bit of 3D tourism. I wanted to see if I could accurately capture this piece digitally, and then reissue a copy for myself. I made the scan in 6 passes that I would later assemble into a complete model. Using this approach, I ensured that I got good detail with very few artifacts due to tracking. Once the scans were made, they could be combined in Mesh Mixer. This is the finished model in Mesh Mixer. The different colors represent the different scans and the seams between them. I chose to print the first model in Polymaker carbon fiber, as it most closely represents the original. I also tried out PolyDissolve, a dissolvable support that wouldn't leave any blemish on the carbon fiber model. My initial goal was met with this 6-inch souvenir that accurately retains most of the detail and certainly the personality of the original. And if I wasn't about to cast this sculpture in metal, I would be done. This is Polycast, and it is a filament specifically designed for investment casting. The resulting model should cleanly burn away and leave nothing but a castable void in investment. Because this model has undercuts, this is really the only way that it could be cast. Because Polycast is clear, it is a bit harder to tell how good the surface quality is. The model's surface will be sealed and smoothed with isopropyl alcohol. It would be best to use a mist, but a brush allows a bit of control over the smoothing. I 3D printed a sprue out of the same material and attached it with CA glue. The investment I am using is generally used for jewelry or small sculptures. I had to make my own flask that was big enough to contain the 6-inch monkey. I figured that some round stovepipe might be perfect for this. I wanted to reduce the amount of investment I would need and keep the wall thickness to a more appropriate 1 to 2 inches. The model is glued down to keep it from floating while the investment cures. You can find the instructions for mix ratios and burnout schedules online. Since I am unable to vacuum this much investment, I am mixing this by hand. I am hoping to incorporate as few bubbles as possible. I am wetting the surface of the model to make it less likely that bubbles will cling to the surface. Once this process is done, the rest of the flask can be assembled and filled. After a couple of days, I removed the cap. I'm heating the bottom to melt the hot glue between the model and the cap to allow it to release without too much effort. I smooth the surface in preparation for the burnout. This is an old kiln that I bought specifically to use for investment burnouts and maybe some future ceramic projects. I placed it in an iron pan to catch ash or debris during the firing. I'll prop the lid for the first few hours to allow steam or any gases to escape. Next, we wait. After 12 hours of firing and 4 to 6 hours of cool down, the mold was finally ready to pour. I probably should have cast the mold hotter, but this was all an experiment at this point, and I was happy that it was going as well as it was. I considered casting this in brass for the obvious Beastie Boys reference, but ultimately I went with aluminum as I felt there was a better chance for success. I made sure that the crucible was full, as the mold will require a lot of metal. Here I am degassing and removing the dross. You will see a tiny crack in the pouring cup. Interestingly, this closes up as the heat enters the mold. I am keeping the metal in the pouring cup molten while the rest of the cast cools. My hope is that the cup will continue to feed the sculpture and minimize the shrinkage. After about an hour, I decided I could begin removing the cast from the mold. When dry, the investment material is similar in texture to gypsum in sheetrock. It is fairly easy to remove the cast as the investment eventually breaks down into a slippery mud when placed in water. Here's the raw aluminum cast, and it looks really great. Some of the print lines remained in the model, so I did a bit of wet sanding to reduce them and to smooth the entire surface of any blemishes. I will use ivory black oil paint to accentuate the details of the model. Ivory black is essentially so brown that it's black and is great for this kind of application. At this point, I could decide between doing a silver model with a small amount of black in the details or a black model with a small amount of silver on the highlights. I thought this best represented the original character. It turned out that I had enough information from the original scans to produce these molds for the base. These molds are coated with mold release because I wanted to try to produce a sandstone base using epoxy impregnated sand. For this, I am using Total Boat penetrating epoxy, as I assumed it would do the best job of wetting out the sand. I combined play sand and masonry sand to achieve a color that was very close to the original. I was shocked at how well this worked. It was important that the sand be packed into the details. Once the epoxy sand had cured, it's only a matter of popping off the forms. With the oil paint fully dry, I can cut off the sprue. I will epoxy the sculpture onto the base and install felt on the bottom of the foot. This sculpture has always made me happy. Now, I have a tiny replica in my home that I can visit every day. I believe that 3D scanners have the potential to bring about some very interesting discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.